at any time there's things to drop into the chat, like some links, that would be awesome. But I think we can go ahead and get started. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody, and thanks for joining us. This is the second time we've tried, we've produced our annual impact report, which is a look back at what took place over last year in the priority-based budgeting community, in your community overall, and truly a chance to celebrate as we reflect on all the accomplishments, and have a chance to talk about where we're headed next for 2022. So we'll have a little bit of both. Let's see here. There is a downloadable report if you haven't accessed it already, and it's a PDF. And my goal today is to walk us through that report with a little bit more explanation. Our choice to produce an impact report is partly to celebrate you all and what you're doing, but also one of our major goals is just to continue to provide education on what priority-based budgeting implementers are doing. So for your own elected officials and staff members who are probably always looking for what's the latest and greatest that's taking place in PBB, hopefully the impact report will serve that purpose and give you something to use, and also kind of like a yearbook for a year in review. Table of contents, I'll follow the report for the most part and just kind of walk you through some of the key points that we're trying to make, and the storylines. I won't go through everything in the report, and sometimes I'll skip around a little bit, but definitely encourage you to, hi Laura, that's Laura Solano from Pueblo. Definitely encourage you to take a look at it in its entirety. I kick things off in the report by reflecting a little bit all the way to last year. At the beginning of last year, at about this time when we were doing the last impact report, we didn't know about ARPA. That wasn't really out yet. So for most of us, there was the possibility and the hope that there was going to be some federal infusion of resources to support local governments, but it wasn't quite clear what shape or form that was going to take. And furthermore, if you put yourself all the way back to last year, man, we were just surviving 2020 and the pandemic, revenue shortfalls for so many of us. Hey, here I'm talking about ARPA and federal infusion, and I should be acknowledging the fact that a number of our audience members are from Canada, which we do in the report, and so there was no ARPA that ended up materializing for your local governments. But I kick off the opening message by saying, if there's one super simple question that we're always focused on in our work in priority-based budgeting, it's our local government leaders are in a better position to be able to tackle their community's most important priorities backed legitimately by budget. That's, if you really think and distill all the work that takes place in priority-based budgeting, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that as you look out towards infrastructure needs, safer communities, equity, climate action, are you able to pursue those types of results undaunted by or undeterred by resource shortfalls or scarcity of any kind? And if we succeed in our work in priority-based budgeting, then we are better able to help local governments feel well-equipped with an abundance of resources, and therefore undeterred as you look out and say, yes, we can pursue massive challenges that are up to local government to solve, because we feel like we have the resources to go ahead and tackle that. That's fundamentally our purpose. And so as we look back on 2021, one of the cool realizations, at least for stateside local governments, was, man, we got a taste of that feeling where we had ARPA resources. Many of us right now have substantial resources, and it's a new type of problem, which is, whoa, what will we do with all of the ARPA resources that we have? And so that taste, that glimpse is super exciting. But then as you really come to understand ARPA, I think we all know that these funds are one-time in nature. So on the one hand, we have tasted what it feels like to have this level of abundance, but it's one time in nature. And the overarching question is, what will we do when ARPA resources are not aplenty and not around? And so that's where priority-based budgeting comes in. And my first point of discussion is, when you think about what we're trying to accomplish as one of our levels of mastery for resource reallocation as a skill set allows a local government to produce an ongoing amount of resources, not one time. If we can master resource reallocation and optimization, we can have readily available resources on par with ARPA resources on an ongoing basis to continue to pursue the results of tomorrow. And as you look at the left-hand side of the screen, as we looked at what has been reported from 2020 to 2021 in the tools, we see a wide-ranging spectrum of organizations, Littleton, Colorado, and Roswell, Georgia, on up to 10% resource reallocation at the programmatic level. And you can see what that means from a budget perspective, $9 million in Littleton's case and almost $8 million in Roswell. And you scan all the way down even to like Alexandria, Virginia at 4% resource reallocation. That's still $22.8 million as they've reported their programmatic costs from one year to the next. And what's exciting to us about this, again, thinking from this initial point I'm trying to make, that if we all felt like ARPA was this once in a lifetime injection of funds that can really be a difference maker in our communities, and that's how we talk about it, what if we could accomplish this all the time? What if we had ongoing resources on par with ARPA? So I draw attention to Littleton because at $9 million of resources reallocated from 2020 to 2021, their ARPA funding is around 12 million. The 12 million is one time in nature. Littleton is reallocating around 9 million for ongoing resource availability. It starts to feel like what you see over on the right-hand side of the screen, ARPA every year. And that is something we're really fixated on. If we can continue to promote this behavior and recognize it and celebrate how organizations are reallocating resources and becoming masters of that, and become even more intentional about resource reallocation, might there be a world where local governments have the resources they need to feel like we can pursue ARPA-esque initiatives all the time. And that's really thrilling. So this was like one of the findings that we wanted to showcase right up front in the report. As an aside, speaking of ARPA, we have adopted some of the key components of the priority-based budgeting tool set and actually supported Battle Creek, City of Pueblo, Roanoke, Virginia, and Tacoma Park, Maryland in a specific ARPA prioritization exercise. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about that as well. That was definitely new, wasn't on the radar screen as we headed into 2021. But thanks to Mike Seaman and Jackie English for their work in actually converting the tools to be able to support ARPA project prioritization. So if repeatable resource reallocation is one of our goals, and that's what we started to see more and more of in 2021, what does that do? Well, as you see here in Pittsburgh, one of the highlight stories from the last year is undaunted by resource scarcity. If we really feel like we can free up and reallocate resources, then it begs the question, where would we direct those resources overall? So that whole feeling of pursuing your society, your community's most pressing challenges, backed by budget. And Pittsburgh exemplified this with shining stars this last year. This was an article that came out from the Natural Resources Defense Council. You gotta love a headline like Pittsburgh puts its money where its goals are. Sounds so simple, but you all in the priority-based budgeting community know how profound and challenging this is to do. So Mayor Peduto and their Chief Resilience Officer, Grant Irvin, participated in Glasgow at the climate conference that took place last year and talked to world leaders about the use of priority-based budgeting to make sure that for all of our communities who really are holding climate action and sustainability as an urgent goal, we have to be backed by budget. We have to put our resources towards the achievement of those goals. So we're thrilled to see what Pittsburgh was able to do. They're one of the highlights, to be sure. Another first was Mayor Peduto creating an executive order. And this is the first time that priority-based budgeting as a program in your program inventory could actually be scored in the mandated category. Sort of an inside joke for PBBers, but the idea that here in Pittsburgh, it's actually part of their policy now. So it's a self-imposed policy, so maybe mandate equals 2 for PBB. Nevertheless, that all departments now, as they go through budgeting, will use a priority-based budgeting lens. And in Pittsburgh's case, they infused a climate and equity lens on budget requests in particular. So we'll talk a little bit more about how imperative it has been for us to bake in and create an actual budget development process. Pittsburgh was the first to be the guinea pig in budget development last year, and definitely incredibly successful overall. Speaking of outcomes backed by budget, the other major initiative that took place last year was our work as a TA provider, a technical assistance provider, at the invitation of GFOA and in partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies for the City Budgeting for Equity and Recovery program overall. So if you hadn't heard about it, there were on the order of 30 local governments who participated in this program. We, on the priority-based budgeting side, supported approximately 10. So Laura's on the call from Pueblo. We had Columbia, South Carolina, Salt Lake City, Utah, Durham, North Carolina, Madison, Wisconsin. And it was not a cookie cutter approach, but the same tried and true priority-based budgeting effort that we all know. These communities would identify an equity goal. They worked with GFOA, Ernst & Young, PFM, and HRNA advisors, among other TA support teams, to identify initiatives that would move the needle on their equity objective and a price tag. So on one track, if you will, here were these cities saying, we want to establish a priority for equity, and here are a host of things that we really want to fund and implement that would actually help us move the needle on this objective. And the guidelines were, you don't have to focus on free solutions. Free solutions weren't discouraged by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea was for any of these initiatives, dream big and put a real price tag on it. So Syracuse, New York, for example, had a sidewalk upgrade program, and that's obviously not free. And then through priority-based budgeting, the effort was trying to find ways to free up and reallocate resources in order to fund those objectives. So again, backed by budget. So this was first of its kind work for communities. And I think what's probably most exciting as a takeaway is that both now on the climate action side of things, looking at Pittsburgh's work, and the equity side of things, here are two extraordinary priorities of our time, and a more repeatable process that communities can follow to the extent that they have these goals as well. Just last week, we had the US Conference of Mayors gathering together, and among their top priorities, we see reducing disparities in our community. So economic opportunity and equity again, really resonating with so many communities to try to make a difference. That's on the left-hand side, and you can pull this article from Route 50. Over on the right-hand side, if you're at all familiar with ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I, they came out with an atlas or some live data on communities who have climate action plans. That's what you're seeing in the map there. And for so many of these organizations, the idea is, yes, we have a climate action plan, but it's not quite clear that they have the budget to fund the initiatives that are in their climate action plans. So we look at these trends that are taking place, and we continue to want to position priority-based budgeting as an effective tool to say, yes, our leaders are focused on climate action, they're focused on equity, and they need to have budget solutions to be able to come through on these commitments. And that's, again, back to the fundamental purpose of ResourceX for the types of priorities that we have ahead of us. So you'll see as well, Liz has redesigned our website, and this focus on program-centric outcome budgeting, specifically highlighting climate action, equity, resilience overall, and of course, fiscal sustainability. So across the board for all of our priorities, infrastructure, safety, economic vitality, transportation, and so on, in addition to emerging priorities of our time, like sustainability and climate action. How is priority-based budgeting positioning itself as a tool to allow us to reallocate resources to fund these objectives and pour them towards the results that really need focus by local government leaders? This was a major highlight of 2021. Last but not least, in the opening note, we focus on our partners at ICMA and GFOA. And if we are to succeed overall in our mission, we have been working for years, as many of you know. I mean, Lori Timfo's on the call, I believe I saw earlier, with our partnerships with ICMA to help transform how city managers are evolving the budget process. And we've been working with GFOA, of course, through writing articles with Shane Kavanaugh on program budgeting back in 2015 and priority-driven budgeting as well. These are recent initiatives that you see on the screen right now. With ICMA, we just got this breaking news that we had been working with them on a curriculum and a certificate, a credential for transforming the budget process and what it means to budget in the 21st century, the types of skill sets that we need to be effective. And it's back to priority-based budgeting mastery. We need to have program data. We need to have a priority-based budgeting framework. We need to readily be able to reallocate resources on par with 10% of our budget. And we need to be able to tackle emerging urgent priorities like climate and equity. So the 21st century budget process curriculum and credential will be rolling out in June. That's just from Brian Bullock at ICMA. And then over on the right-hand side with GFOA, stay tuned. And I think we get to this in my very last slide, but we have a number of webinars coming up with Shane Kavanaugh and GFOA on their Rethinking Budgeting initiative, which we're just so pleased to have a role in contributing to. But if you noticed, another highlight of 2021, GFOA's Distinguished Budget Award criteria for the very first time is involving program reporting at the programmatic level and the outcome level. So this is a long time coming to see that as an evaluation criteria for excellence in budgeting. And we're just so pleased to see GFOA moving in that direction. The line item budget last year celebrated its 100-year anniversary. So you'll see that highlighted in GFOA's work. The whole point is, if we're going to be equipped to manage and be successful public servants in the 21st century, in our time right now, the line item budget is just not equipped to help us. It doesn't provide the sort of dexterity for managing resources and shifting like we need to be able to do. And that's what our focus is in mastery within priority-based budgeting. So the opening letter identifies, again, from the top, we need to be able to commit to substantial priorities backed by budget. In order to do that, we are focused on resource reallocation. We are seeing program-centric outcome budgeting, like you saw in Pittsburgh on climate, and the Bloomberg communities on equity. And then ultimately transforming the budget process with our partners, ICMA and GFOA, including, last but not least, our responsibility and duty to build out software that supports a budget development process, as you saw in Pittsburgh, and as we've just started to roll out this year overall. So that's kind of the opening framework for the impact report. The second part then is, I think most everybody knows, but I'm not positive, so I'll spend just a little bit of time now talking about it. But we took investment from a partner called Innosphere Ventures, and they are investing $1.5 million into ResourceX for a minority share of equity in the company. And for those of you who have been around for quite some time in the PBB community, this was not really on our radar screen to seek out an investment opportunity. And when we have been approached by investors in the past, oftentimes the investment has been framed around putting money into a company, helping that company grow to a certain level in order to have that company be acquired and provide a large return on investment for the investor and the shareholders. And to us, that was just never our North Star. We've always thought, if there was a partner out there where an acquisition or a merger or a partnership of any sort would make great sense to allow us to really expand our impact, meaning if we could reach hundreds of more local governments this way, and school districts and healthcare providers, then maybe, just maybe, a strong partnership, a merger, or acquisition would make sense. But it wasn't like solution number one for us to be able to accelerate our impact. And so we've frankly shied away from those types of opportunities overall. Innosphere Ventures is actually led by a former city manager. His name is Mike Freeman. Mike Freeman was the city manager of Ashland, Oregon. He was a board member and highly involved in the old innovation groups before they turned into the Alliance for Innovation. Mike Freeman worked for ICMA, and he was economic development director in the city of Fort Collins when Innosphere Ventures, which started in Fort Collins, really got off the ground. So Mike's position moved from city of Fort Collins over to CEO of Innosphere. And the Innosphere was a small business incubator, providing resources and mentorship and guidance to small and growing companies, whether they're in software or environmental technology, companies with a strong purpose of serving a better future overall. So what changed is Innosphere offered and strongly encouraged us, as we've been working with them together for the last several years, to consider an investment from their group that had no strings attached around acquisition. And to us, that really gave us something to strongly think about as we're considering the impact that we want to make. And I'll just tell you from the perspective of what's our North Star at ResourceX, we have 70 clients at this time. Lifetime in the pre-software days, if you took everybody we've ever worked with, we're something on the order of 300 plus local governments in total. But we have 70 on the software platform today. And as you heard my opening statements about the kind of impact we wish to make on climate goals, on equity, we really understand our role really needs to expand to serve more and more local governments and make sure that everybody has access to the type of tools that we're trying to create. And so it all started to come together and really make sense that if we do take investment and we're completely clear on where we're putting those resources, it's about accelerating our impact. And that's exactly what took place. We have just formed our board of directors. So clearly I have a board seat from Innisphere, John Smith, who he brings a software perspective. Mike Seaman has led the charge, and Jackie English most recently. Mike built our Generation 1.0 software tools when we moved from spreadsheets to the software platform that many of you know today. And Jackie English, as product manager, led the complete rebuild and launch of our latest software platform that was released in September. And our product roadmap is under the leadership of Jackie. John Smith comes with a wealth of software experience and is going to help us grow our expertise as we build out a substantial product roadmap that I'll get into, that includes, again, complete budget development, program and operating budgeting, capital budgeting, personnel forecasting, financial forecasting, budget reports themselves, and more. That's just for 2022. And our second board member, so we only have 3, which is kind of nice, is Jane Brodigam. And if you don't know Jane, we first met Jane. She was one of our earliest customers from the city of Boulder, Colorado, when she was city manager there. Like Lori on the call, like John Dance, like so many of our earliest partners, Jane really helped us to shape the product from a city manager's lens. She went on to become ICMA president, and Jane's support will help us to establish more and more partnership and credibility with ICMA, and provide just more education and outreach from the top, from an ICMA perspective. So we're super thrilled about the board. And I think you should consider John and Jane, they're board members, they're advisors. They're here to help us as we try to grow the mission and the impact that we wish to have. John's from the perspective of how do you create a robust software tool that makes it easier and easier on your clients. And Jane will come with that perspective to help us reach more and more local governments from a city manager perspective overall. So this is huge, and also a major part of our story for 2021. So speaking of accelerating impact, with the investment, one of the major reasons to do it was to accelerate how we can build out the tools. So I think for a lot of you, if you've come to a ResourceX summit in the past or priority-based budgeting annual conference, oftentimes the conversation turns to new features and things that we could build out in the future. And that has always been totally thrilling. And we'd bring it back to Mike Seaman in development and say, Mike, what can you do? This is what everybody is asking for. And Mike's done an incredible job to build the tools to the point that we've been able to get to. Now with investment, starting in 2020, we have partnered with an organization who has helped us to rebuild the entire existing software platform in a way that allows for more scalability. And as you see here for 2022, we have built from the Pittsburgh experience a program-centric budget development component of the portal. City of Flagstaff, Arizona is the first who's using that right now. City of Brisbane, California will be the second, coming up here in just a few weeks. And our goal for 2022 is that somewhere around 51%, if you talk to Jackie, 1 out of 2 organizations this year will actually start to build their budgets within the portal. And that's exciting because for everybody who has implemented PBB along the way, I think everyone recognizes priority-based budgeting has been this really powerful business intelligence that tells you where your resources are being invested at a program level, how those programs tie to your outcomes. And it certainly has informed budget decisions as kind of like a cross-reference or a cross-check. But if there's been any longing for or disconnect, it's that we've all desired to actually bring it into the budget development process. That if I was a department, I'm asking for a new staff member, I want to link that staff member to the program or programs that I think they're going to serve, understand that program in light of how it scores against results and basic program attributes, and allow everybody, our decision makers, our city manager's office, our budget office, and our elected officials to scrutinize the value of the budget requests coming forward. Again, we witnessed that happen in our Pittsburgh work last year, and that's why we feel it's a true breakthrough, budgeting at a program level, going through the entire budget development process, creating budget recommendations. In Tacoma, Washington, it allowed them to push back on budget recommendations and say, these recommendations coming forward are not in line with our equity objective overall. How can we develop better budget recommendations? So it's a major part of the puzzle for helping really fulfill the point of priority-based budgeting for our organizations. And so that's number one, first and foremost, on the roadmap. Along with that, man, if you've seen Littleton, Colorado's budget inserts, where they have program highlight sheets documenting the budget requests that are being approved, they have manually built out these incredible reports to demonstrate how they're infusing PBB into their discussions. We want that to be more readily accessible in budget reports that we're producing. The city of Fort Saskatchewan on this call is also among the top 5 leaders, at least, if not, top 2, in demonstrating by program within each department the year-to-year change, and then footnotes, which Marley and Shannon have had to do forensically through interviews with departments to explain why is there a difference that the department is recommending at a program level from year to year. We want that type of reporting to be intentional. The software tools can capture that. Right now in Flagstaff, the departments are, for any budget change at a program level, getting down to the line items and actually documenting and describing what their intention is. So Marley and Shannon, you won't have to go back and interview to come up with that explanation. It's baked into the budget process itself. You also see on here capital budgeting. Again, Fort Saskatchewan has been a leader in applying PBB to capital projects, but we want that to be a part of the budget development process, that it is included in the tools. Fiscal health forecasting is another major component, where in the past we've had a pretty good software product. We had Excel spreadsheets in the past, but again, it was a tool that was never quite connected to the rest of the process. And so now we want the same scenario planning that I think was part of the biggest value out of fiscal health, that you can do what if scenarios and extrapolate your revenues and your expenses and filter by general fund, separate out one-time versus ongoing, but actually see that come to life in direct connection with the budget requests that are being put together to examine the affordability of the budget requests coming from your departments. And part and parcel with that is the personnel forecasting component overall. These are the 4 things that we're focused on for this year, and rolling them out piece by piece. Jackie has an extensive product roadmap that has each of the components, when they're being wireframed, when they're being developed, when they're being rolled out and available in your functionality overall. So I think this is possibly a slightly outdated version, but if you're interested in that, stay in touch. But this is something that's just a major part of our ability to accelerate our impact. And again, back to the point of the investment, it would take us 10 years to develop all of those things that we think that we can get to here in 2022. And the sooner we can get to that type of functionality, the more appealing priority-based budgeting is to many more organizations who see it as part of their basic budget building exercise. And then back to our current clients who are implementing, we sure hope that this eliminates or reduces the barrier that you've experienced, where priority-based budgeting has been something on the side that informs the budget, and now it's something that's directly involved in the creation of the budget. If we can remove more barriers, eliminate frictions for you to implement PBB and use the data, we think that we open up the opportunity for more mastery in the tools, more resource reallocation, and so on. Speaking of accelerating impact, this is a picture of the team. I love how Liz put in as of January 2022. That's funny because the team is growing quickly. So we're up to 14, I believe, within the United States, if you count up all of those team members. And then you see that Astea Solutions, our software development team, we're going to build that team up to about 17 or 18 full-time software development personnel who are supporting the ResourceX mission. So if you think about our growth plan in 2022, the vast majority of our use of resources is going towards building out that product roadmap. In addition, we have people besides me and Eric Fabian and Liz who are actually out there talking to new organizations, talking to our current clients as well, which I've certainly been a bottleneck on getting more education out there to try to recruit more implementers. So Brent Sherman joins our team from Esri. If you haven't met Brent, Esri is the world-class GIS company. Brent leads our outreach and engagement team now. And Brad Steckert, who is formerly in Washington County, Wisconsin, and joined our team, and Evan Lake are supporting Brent. But you'll see that outreach and engagement team grow substantially this year as well. And then from a customer success point of view, the implementers, our entire team is led by Santina Raikau, who's in New Mexico. We brought on Michelle Holder. If you had met her, Michelle had come to previous priority-based budgeting conferences as a local government professional in Aspen, Colorado, and other places as well. So we're so happy that Michelle joined our team. Stella Carr from the Massachusetts area was most recently a sustainability director for the town of Lexington. And as we get more and more involved in the pursuit of climate action plans and helping prioritize resources for those endeavors, we're just amazed that we were able to have Stella join our team as well. Denise Taylor, right here in Colorado, was formerly executive director of the Colorado City and County Management Association. I think you know Liz Johnson, who put together this entire report, Eric Fabian, who leads our partnerships with ICMA, GFOA, and Bloomberg, Eric Keck, who's now in the Twin Falls area of Idaho, will be launching more consulting services this year, high value services to help our organizations really focus on their data, maybe tackle cultural tensions in the organization that are barriers to success, and probably most importantly, working from your data to create programmatic insights and move those insights to action and execution. That's what Eric Keck will be rolling out this year as well. So, man, I think I've mentioned everybody, but the whole point here, as you'll see in the presentation is, or in the report itself, this is what we're able to do now that we have some investment to really ramp up and accelerate the kind of difference that we're hoping to make overall in the world. All right, so I wanted to go back to the beginning of 2021 and talk about what were our goals heading in. So there's a little bit of history, and it will give us a chance to actually highlight some of the data that we wanted to showcase in the impact report. So number one here said, streamline the insight process to enable the pursuit of outcomes critical to your organization. I'll get into that, but if you didn't if you hadn't seen the insight process, for all PBB implementers, we have been offering workshops, and they are a process of idea creation and innovation, to refining those ideas for practicality and implementation from a cost perspective, a timeline perspective, and ultimately execution and rollout. I'll talk about how we even got on the track to insights, but this last year we wanted to make this is clearly leading to a lot of customer success, and so we wanted to bake it into the tools and do much more insight creation overall. So that was one of our goals heading into last year. Whereas the point here being, the more our organizations were focused on the use of their programmatic data and the direction of every program that they're providing, what we call program insights, the better the action that they're able to take. And that's like fulfillment in PBB. The second objective was launching the new platform that Jackie had been working on with our team, Astea, for overall scalability and support of our growth plan. So I think as of the writing of the report, we now have 30 organizations who are active in the new tools. We did launch that at our annual conference, our virtual annual conference last year in September. And that's incredibly exciting. Third, we did want to see everybody in person. We got to, oh man, everyone's been on the same ride on this, but we had been planning an in-person conference last year, and then we did go virtual. But we did get to the ICMA annual conference. So we did have a chance to see many of you, but this upcoming year, as we'll end today's presentation, we are again planning probably our biggest conference that we've ever been able to put together. And that will be in August. Liz, if you do have a link to that posting, that would be awesome, but I'll hit that at the end for sure. And then number 4 from last year was, again, recognizing that insights were leading to action on a far more repeatable basis. On top of that, Pittsburgh gave us that first chance to actually get into the budget development process. We did roll out last year our version 1.0. So these were our goals as we started. I want to simply walk you through how we got to those goals. Oh, by the way, we had how many? I think 15 first-year implementers across the country. There's a report, there's an infographic that highlights the new implementers. Wetaskiwin up north in Canada was a new first year. Banning, California, Yuma, Arizona, Salt Lake City, Utah, Pueblo, Colorado, Austin, Texas, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, Wausau, Wisconsin. Wow, a lot of Wisconsins. I hadn't seen it portrayed like this before. In Pittsburgh, Chester County, which is in the Philadelphia area, Tacoma Park, Maryland, Roanoke, Virginia, Durham, North Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. So that was our honor roll of first years to join the class of the PBB community. I did a version of this next section at our annual summit in September, and I want to go through it again ever so quickly because I think it will solidify the path that we've been on and why both insights are a huge focus area and the budget process. So kind of going way back to the beginning, we launched priority-based budgeting, and our hope was communities would take their budget, align it with the results of the day. We'd have a measurement tool, and that they would make positive changes. They evaluated, hey, this program seems to be a low priority. Maybe we should reallocate resources away from it and put those resources towards a higher priority pursuit. As many of you will remember, so our initial technique to get repeatability was sharing stories of successes. So we had the City of Boulder's yoga program, which sticks in everybody's mind from the earlier days. Boulder had implemented. They noticed here's a program, yoga, that fell low in the prioritization process, and it became kind of a poster child of how you can use PBB to your advantage. So in this case, it turns out that Boulder got into the business of yoga way long ago, when there was no other yoga studios around, and it was very popular. And Boulder was, a leading edge city in this type of activity. And you fast forward to when they implemented PBB, and not only is it not relating to results in the highest way, but it was not mandated. It's certainly not a high degree of reliance, because as you look over on the right-hand side, there are so many more yoga studios in Boulder that have emerged. And the question was, why is the city subsidizing this program overall? So they ended up partnering with some of the private sector areas. The joke was there are more yoga studios than there are Starbucks in Boulder. And that was a shock to everybody. So made to stick. If you've read the Heath Brothers book, The Power of Stories, we thought, let's just keep on sharing stories, and PBB implementers will listen to the stories. They'll get the point about how to apply this data to make programmatic change. Well, that was really good. But then the desire was for something a little bit more of a framework to take the Boulder yoga story and say, what are the kind of key areas where every program should fit? What should we be looking for? So we created the blueprint, which is the next level up from just simply sharing stories about programmatic change. So the blueprint was, hey, as you look at your priority-based budgeting data, here's the point. Left-hand side of the blueprint, we guess that you have things that need new funding. You have programs that you want to start, or you have current programs that need more money overall. In Pittsburgh's case, they needed to fund their climate action plan. In the Bloomberg programs, they needed to fund their equity initiatives, right? So you have left-hand side of the blueprint, we need to push money in a certain area. And the question is, where are you going to get those resources? And our two levers for change are, you can spend your current budget differently, free up and reallocate resources. That's where our passion for 10% reallocation comes from, is if you can free up and reallocate 10% of your budget, you can pour it towards those new needs. And we position local government to really pursue a better future. And then part and parcel, you can add new revenue to the equation. So these are our two resource generating solutions that we came up with in the blueprint. And while there are more solutions probably than what's listed here, these are the primary ones. So you can take service levels and reduce them. You can find program efficiencies. You can focus on partnerships. And our premise was your PBB data is setting you up to find those programs that are most likely to be a partnership program for sourcing it differently, or a low priority program that you can change the service level on, or look for program efficiencies. And the same idea on the revenue side, we're calculating the cost of every program and the resources coming in for those that charge fees or charges, or maybe have a grant coming in as well. And you can use that PBB data to say, how can we get to 100% sustainability? Like I said, there are more solutions here. Lori Timpo on the call said, what about investing in programs that lead to greater economic development and therefore increase your tax base without necessarily asking for new taxes or rates? Brilliant. That would be another investment strategy for revenue generation. So we created the blueprint and start to roll this out and say, hey, every program has a future. And if I'm a department, I want to put my programs into this sort of categorization. Is it a program where the trajectory is growth? Is it a program where I have a revenue generating opportunity to tag the program with that we should be pursuing? In other words, if it's 2 years down the road and we're not at 100% sustainability, then we haven't met our goal. Or is it a program that we should be focused on sunsetting? And this worked out really well. We had Washington County, Wisconsin following the blueprint. This is how they were documenting their reallocation opportunities up to 13% of their budget. Littleton, Colorado went so far as to put a big scoreboard in their budget book, every program and its blueprint opportunity across the top. So we're like, the blueprint is game over. Everybody's going to succeed. But of course, we needed to continue to go further. because the blueprint was a standalone mental framework and it required all PBB implementers to do something on their own outside of the tools. So the next step in our evolution was get this in the tools, have the ability to tag programs with this future direction that the program is headed in. And that's what we call the insights. So insights haven't been around forever. They began, among other places, in Salem, Oregon. So this is a look at one of our first insight workshops where departments were coming in, scouring their program inventories and tagging programs with what's the direction that it's headed in. What was really cool is you're constantly looking at the budget, and here was a portrayal of Salem's budget around insight opportunities, which programs are on a trajectory for growth, which programs have been tagged with cost recovery, partnership, all of the categories of the blueprint. And so incorporating that in the tools was something that was incredibly important and a huge breakthrough. And again, we thought, now that it's in the tools, everyone will tag their programs and they'll go forth and they'll execute on their insights and they'll shift their resources towards new endeavors. And I think you get the story. But every piece here is a step along the path of the product roadmaps of yesteryear, I suppose. So insights to outcomes, one of the things that we found was insights are a really powerful concept that you can tag a program with an opportunity area, but it gets way better if you frame an insight workshop around a specific goal. So in Pittsburgh's case, they framed their insight workshop around the fact that they had an unfunded climate action plan. And so all departments were brought in to say, we're going to tag programs with insights for reallocation or revenue generation, knowing that the resources we come up with are all meant to fund our climate action plan overall. And that's how they got to the $41 million worth of opportunities. And that was awesome. So for the first time, we had a very organized and outcome-focused insight workshop. This took place early last year in 2021. All of our Bloomberg clients who went through the budgeting for equity work, their insight workshops were framed around equity. So in Pueblo, among other organizations, they would come up with a laundry list of equity initiatives, each with a price tag. And our insight workshops were focused on how do we free up resources from your current budget among all departments and generate new revenues in order to fund those presumably unfunded equity initiatives overall. In Kansas City, Kansas, their insight workshop was entirely focused on the fact that they projected a structurally imbalanced budget. And so they took part, again, in this three-phased insight approach that Liz just posted about in order to come up with ideas that would help create financial sustainability out beyond the use of their one-time ARPA funds. So this was all making sense to us. Insights are budget recommendations. They're programmatic change recommendations. You can tag every program in your PBB data, come up with opportunities, and insights are really looking good. I'll point out that in 2021, over the course of last year, we launched 25 organizations through the Insight Workshop series. And you're going to see this in the impact report. Some of the highlights there, over 2,000 insights were created last year with associated resource reallocation efforts. Of those, 312 were approved for immediate execution. So what's also cool about the insight work is that you're capturing a whole host of opportunities and things you could do with each and every program, knowing you can't implement every single idea. So 312 out of 2,000 were moved forward and executed in the PBB community, meaning there's still 1,500, 1,600, 1,800 insights, a lot of potential still left on the table for things that organizations can do for next year and the year after. And it's documented. Sometimes, for all of us who have maybe been through the Great Recession, or times when we had to gather the troops together and come up with our most creative ideas, time passes, you implement some of the best ideas right away, time passes, and then another crisis occurs, or a situation where the staff kind of looks at each other and says, didn't we go through like a creative revenue generation workshop 10 years ago? Whatever happened to that report? And now all of the insights are forever stored in your PBB data for taking action the next time that you need them. Insights, in overall, the approved insights were of the value of about 73 million in repurposing opportunities and 8 million in new revenue. So this is mind-blowing. It's a major step in the right direction, that if we can have PBB organizations not only have their data, but have a pathway to create recommendations on the data that we call insights. You can have in 2021, maybe your insight workshop was around equity. In 2022, maybe it's around climate. In 2023, maybe you're having an insight workshop and we're back to some sort of recessionary times if inflation continues and things like that come up. But we want it repeatable. We want it baked in. And this sort of discipline is leading towards data leads to insights, insights lead to action. And that's the promised land for PBB overall. Finally, or almost finally, we had replicable success that we're constantly focused on. So the idea here is we're seeing so many examples and highlight stories of people getting it. But we also have organizations that are not Fort Sask or Littleton or Pittsburgh or Pueblo. And so how do we help the rest of the PBB community with just making this easier and easier? So what we call competency to mastery. Last year, again, we launched the first impact report in order to celebrate the successes, document the path to get there, and disseminate the information so everybody has a roadmap. This year, this being the second one, that's exactly the game plan again. So in last year's report, you will see the Fort Sask budget book, which, John or Marley or Shannon, if you at all want to share that right now, a link to your current budget book. They've just done an amazing job of shifting from line items are leading the story in the budget book to now everything is communicated at a program level. I shared the story of Littleton. This was from last year's impact report, and that scoreboard where along the top are all of the blueprint opportunities and all of the programs on the left-hand side that are marked for programmatic change in the budget were designated with their future overall. So replicability from competency to mastery, our hope is to just keep on documenting, building it into the tools, documenting, build that pathway into the tools. And then this year, of course, thanks a lot, Shannon. From competency to mastery, I don't know of any other organization besides Bloomberg who has the same focus on repurposing of resources that we've been trying to emphasize. And again, our hope is to document this and get more intentional about why 10% is being reallocated in Littleton and how they ended up doing it. If we can bake that into the tools, so you can see every program that had a change, how those resources were reallocated, then we'll have everybody on the path to mastery overall. Our final path was institutionalizing all of this into the budget process. So insights are awesome, but if you really think about it, insights don't, they have a budget component, but they're still outside of the budget overall. So last year was that amazing opportunity to use Pittsburgh as a guinea pig, create a program-centric budget development path where they were able to add a climate lens, have every budget recommendation come from a PBB program perspective. Now you can actually do a line item recommendation so long as it's tied back to programs. That's what Flagstaff's working on right now, in addition to program-centric budgeting, but everything is contained within your PBB data. so that just as we look back on 2021 and our initial goals, I think what you're seeing here, again, as a recap, did we streamline the insight process to enable the pursuit of outcomes in a major way? And probably still a lot of room for improvement and making that insight workshop process even faster. I know Eric Keck and the customer success team are working on that. The new tools have a beautiful insight tracker component of the system. So I think we really achieved that goal, number one. Number two, the launch of online PBB was definitely achieved with 30 organizations now using it. Number three, that's where we're hoping to get to this year with our annual summit in August. And again, for anybody who's been to a priority-based budgeting conference before, it's always an incredible experience to share with your peers what's being accomplished. And there's just an incredible amount of excitement and enthusiasm. This year, we hope to even take it to a completely next level. I won't even tease some of the speakers who Liz is working on, but really would highly recommend, if you're able to attend, to come and be part of it. I know GFOA and ICMA will be attending and participating and presenting as well. And then number four, creating a budget development process is well underway and being used. And I think you saw in the product roadmap exactly where we're headed for the rest of 2022. So you're going to read about this in the impact report. But those are four major milestones from last year, feeding into how we're hoping to accelerate into 2022. I put this in here as well, because if there was one more accomplishment from last year that we did not anticipate, it was the rollout of ARPA tools. We were inspired by what Pueblo did and Laura Solano on the call, and what Alexandria, Virginia, how they were able to use PBB concepts, creating a scoring rubric for the kind of projects that are being identified and how to prioritize these potential proposals. And now we've rolled it out. Tacoma Park is using it, Roanoke, Virginia, and I think Columbia, Missouri might be the next organization who is using the ARPA platform to gather the best proposals, get some minimum specifications around the costs, score them and prioritize them and report on them, so that we can have a legitimate plan for how to use the ARPA resources overall. All right, we're almost to the end of my presentation. And here I am drawing attention to communities who have exhibited mastery in priority-based budgeting. We did have a chance at our virtual summit to talk about these stories and highlight these communities overall. Liz, if you have the chance to drop in where some of the listeners can find the recordings specifically of communities who were celebrated. Last year was the first time that we actually created a challenge coin as well, which is really cool. If you know the tradition on challenge coins, it's the closest thing we have to a trophy or recognition for each level of mastery overall. And it's something that we continue to want to integrate in our work with ICMA and GFOA as well. Will it ever become like the Distinguished Budget Award? Maybe that's the ultimate dream. But nevertheless, this year's report, in the impact report, actually has much more specific descriptions of each of the communities and what they were able to accomplish. I'll hit them in celebration from the top, but as a refresher on the mastery levels. So level 1 is orange. It is the communicate level. And the whole idea here is that last year you did line item budgeting. Now you've shifted and you have programmatic data. You've organized your line items at the program level. You've prioritized them. and you have this new window on the world of where your resources are going. And so level 1 mastery, we suggest, is the ability of the organization to use that programmatic data for the very first time, as maybe you're putting it into your budget book, which is what Fort Sask has done, or you're using it for cost studies or cost recovery studies. You're talking about programs in council meetings. You're using that programmatic data to your advantage overall. So we highlighted Flagstaff, Arizona, in terms of their exhibiting mastery of level 1, and mainly because if you go online and you search priority-based budgeting in Flagstaff, you'll see multi-language video presentations that the city put together to communicate about their program data specifically to citizens. And it was just an incredible piece of work. They built their own website to add that information. Thanks a lot, Liz, for putting that out there. City of Ferndale had an incredibly transparent process for priority-based budgeting that was also showcased to citizens, and specifically not only on their programmatic side, but in the review of their capital budgeting as well. So their city manager, Joseph, and Kyle, in terms of sharing that information publicly and being very thoughtful and transparent about the prioritization process, Ferndale was a level 1 winner. City of Rowlett in Texas, much like Littleton, Colorado before, where Littleton had crafted programmatic reports in the budget book to document where any programs were changing from a resource allocation perspective in the budget. Rowlett took that and took it to the next level. So once upon a time, we had dreamed of having a program manual where it's a part of the budget, and you can see the trends in how any specific program is moving up or down in resource allocation. Are you spending more on cybersecurity? Are you spending less on payroll processing? And that's exactly what Rowlett has put together, trying to combine all of the priority-based budgeting data that was used to inform budget decisions. You can see cost trends for every program. You can see revenue trends. You can see staffing trends. And for all that Rowlett put together, we're learning from Rowlett on what we can bake into our platform from a reporting perspective so that this can all be automated. But it's pretty groundbreaking work from Rowlett, and definitely this entire spirit of level 1, which is how are you communicating, how you're using your programmatic data throughout the budget process overall. Finally, in the level 1 category was the city of Duluth, Minnesota. And if you hadn't seen this report last year in Government Finance Review, city of Duluth was a cover story on priority-based budgeting. Jen Carlson, their finance director, documents from 2018 up until now how and why they made a transition from line item budgeting in the face of a dramatic budget shortfall, not being super satisfied with the types of requests that were coming forward to handle the budget shortfall. They knew they needed to make a shift. So she talks about the early days, that it was a rational decision-making tool for balancing the budget. And then fast forwards to even the entire defund or reimagine the police department types of initiatives that were taking place, and how Duluth was able to go and look at their entire police department budget at a program level and look specifically at the investment in each and every program. They talk about tying this to their community vision, I think through 2035. And the beauty of just having this kind of data at your fingertips when council members are saying, how much does it cost us to do snow removal? That Duluth actually can respond to that because they have that information. So incredible work by the city of Duluth. And again, you'll read about them even more in the impact report and in the link that Liz just shared. The second level then is, okay, once you have your priority-based budgeting data, that's awesome. You can use your programs, you can report, you can be transparent. But what about making change? Once you see how your resources are prioritized, it begs a question, where do we begin to pull back our investments and reallocate our resources for trade-off decisions overall. So you start to get good at resource reallocation using the blueprint and maximization of resources, which is the revenue side. It's not just reallocation, it's where can we be clever and bring in new resources overall as well. So Pittsburgh, clearly, I've shared this story earlier on, but their approach to using the insight workshops to reallocate $41 million, or at least identify 41 million in opportunities. I think the reallocation focuses on still over $20 million executed. They are clearly a front runner. And Liz, I think, has posted about an Atlas article on the city of Pittsburgh's work. I covered this a little bit a few slides ago, but the unified government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, Doug Bach, city manager who just retired, and Kathleen Von Achen, the leaders of that team, but using insight workshops for a specific outcome, and in their case, long-term budget stability. What was brilliant about their work is even in the midst of receiving tremendous ARPA resources, they said, yes, but those are one-time resources. They don't fix our structural budget deficit. So that's what was the impetus to still engage in insight workshops to come up with the 9 million and counting to address their budget shortfall. So that's resource reallocation opportunities at their best. So the third level of mastery. Oh, and by the way, in the ICMA curriculum that rolls out in June, when we talk about what is the training for 21st century budgeting, this is it. The training is equipping city managers and teams of leaders within the participating organizations with the 4 levels of mastery is what the entire program is going to be about. But level 3 is, okay, once you start to appreciate priority-based budgeting as a powerful tool for resource reallocation and maximization, then the next question becomes, what if you could reallocate 10%? What do you need to fund that you're not funding today? So we love level 3 because it's hyper-focused on the results that are in need of attention and making sure that we don't fall short of our commitment to funding those results ultimately. So where it ties to Pittsburgh is their work in being crystal clear that they felt they were falling short on their commitment to climate action and sustainability. That was their reason for implementing priority-based budgeting. They fast forwarded through data creation, insight workshops in order to identify the 41 million and pour it towards their climate action goals overall. So this is like exactly what we want to see take place. Battle Creek, Michigan was an award winner for 2021 for incorporating equity into their results for the very first time. Battle Creek actually implemented, I believe, in 2015. They established their results framework and definitions, identified programs, costed them, and prioritized them versus those that set of results. But they've had tremendous turnover at the elected official level. Their community has changed, and in light of what took place in Minneapolis with George Floyd, among many other examples, Battle Creek said, we have to go back to the citizens and say, what community do we want? So they opened up the creation of results and result definitions and heard in full force that equity needed to be prioritized in the budget. So Battle Creek is an award winner because of their direct dialogue on resetting their results. They have now prioritized their ARPA resources towards the same result set, which is super cool. And it has changed their budget prioritization as well. So that's how Battle Creek exhibited mastery at the level 3 pursuit. And finally, in level 3, among the Bloomberg communities, the city of Columbia, South Carolina, this was the first time that they had ever established an equity definition in the city. And this is what came out of the city budgeting for equity and recovery work. So Mayor Steve Benjamin, Missy Kaufman from Finance and Budget, Teresa Wilson, the city manager. One of the initial questions in the Bloomberg program was, okay, great, you want to focus on equity. What does it mean to you in Columbia, South Carolina? So they had to develop this definition for the very first time, develop metrics around that definition, and our insight workshop was developed there, including, as you see at the bottom, 80 recommendations and potential resource generation of $1.3 million towards their pursuit of equity overall. So that was Columbia. And then last but not least, we have level 4, which suggests you will get very far if all you did was make it through level 3 and you're just focused on your own organization and how to optimize your own budget towards results. And that's amazing. If you become a master of level 3, you're doing great things and your community will be much better off. But there is a question of what could take place next. And level 4 is about looking beyond your organization at other partners, your county, if you're a city, or other local governments, looking at nonprofits, looking at the private sector, and trying to identify where there are organizations where you could either partner with them and free up your own resources, which is just traditional sourcing choices overall, or where your purpose is aligned. That's why we have the power of shared purpose. So you're mutually trying to create a safer community or a healthier economy or a greater transportation system. And how can you tap into their resources and align them? So it's regional resource optimization. We highlighted another of the budgeting for equity communities, Pueblo, Colorado, and Laura, who's on the call, for their $1 million reading challenge. And this was a partnership that was established with the city of Pueblo and Pueblo County, utilizing their ARPA resources. So this was just absolutely classic city and county partnership on ARPA, which we definitely wanted to highlight, because as we're starting to see, the use of ARPA resources is hard enough as each individual local government focuses on how they'll allocate those resources and choose which proposals to fund. But the fact that the city and the county pooled resources for this particular initiative and worked together was definitely out of the box. So Pueblo is hugely representing level 4. I will kind of move a little bit more quickly. East Moline also had partnership opportunities with their EMS and their police department programs. And the city of Durham, North Carolina, also pooled resources with their county as they are pursuing ARPA. They had one shared website as they were taking in proposals overall. So didn't mean to scoot through East Moline and Durham. They both did amazing work at the level 4 area of mastery. Again, the whole idea is, how do you look beyond your own organization at some of those other partnerships? And just very thankful to celebrate all the work that they're doing and hope that others can replicate it. And then our responsibility is to learn the lessons, take the best of those examples, and try to bake them into our product and our services to make sure that everybody has a chance to accomplish what those organizations accomplished as well. Well, I'm at the last slide of the presentation, and there's so much to cover. I know it took me almost an hour and a half. You probably could have read the entire report in an hour and a half, but hopefully we brought some color and life to so many of the stories and just some excitement for what they're accomplishing. The last page of the report is more focused on where we're headed in 2022. You do see an updated calendar of events. And I think we have most of these events, or at least the most upcoming, on our website as well. February 9th is a webinar with ICMA specific to, February 16th is the webinar with ICMA specific to how communities are using ARPA resources to prioritize equity initiatives. February 9th, what I meant to say was This will be a ResourceX led event where we're showcasing some of the most up-to-date budget functionality that we've talked about, that Pittsburgh used, that Flagstaff is using right now, that Brisbane will be using here in just a couple of weeks, and what program-centric budgeting looks like, how it ties into the GFOA recommendations, and giving everybody a glimpse of what the tools can do. So please join us for that, especially if you're interested in being one of the 51% that Jackie's hoping to take on program-centric budgeting for this year. You see March, April, I'm trying to get to August, there it is. August is our annual conference, and it is set for 11th through the 13th. Liz had put in a save the date in the chat, so thanks a lot for that, Liz. And we definitely hope to see you all there. And then scattering throughout April, May, June, and July, I think we have an ICMA and or GFOA event every month. It's either with ICMA or GFOA, or both in the exact same month, where I mentioned how we're developing the curriculum with ICMA for 21st century budgeting, and that rolls out in June. We're also working with Lynn Scott and Laura Savage. ICMA has made a tremendous commitment to prioritizing and funding equity throughout communities, and we are their chosen partner to help develop a specific program for how to budget for equity based on all of the Bloomberg work overall. So you see all of that culminates in July for an ICMA Equity Summit, which we'll be participating in as well. Man, this was just a thrill to look back on the last year and also think about where we're headed. I will definitely stick around for the next 10, 15 minutes if anybody has any questions or anything they wanted to discuss. But overall, just thank you immensely for being a part of the priority-based budgeting community. It's unfathomable the kind of things that everybody is achieving, and we're just so excited to ramp up to be able to provide accelerated product development and the team that can support you overall. So from the bottom of my heart, just thank you so much for being a part of the community. And that's a wrap on the report. Thanks, Laura. Thank you so much.